Welcome back, folks. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 4 of I'll Grieve You With This, a podcast about grief and humor. And let's face it, if you made it to episode 4, you know what this is about. It's hosted by me, Micah Walsh, wherein I have conversations with other comedians about their losses and how it affected their humor and all sorts of other necessary things. Not unlike some of my previous interviews, this week's guest I actually didn't know very well at all. And then after our conversation, I kind of felt like we had a better understanding of each other. And that's been nice. It's a lot shorter episode than last week. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of my critics have been telling me to edit it down. And I'd say start your own podcast. Yeah, this is episode 4. I'll grieve you with this with Ben Wasserman. Enjoy. Ben Wasserman, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I wanted to start this show because I feel like grief and trauma are something that pretty universally experienced, but not really talked about too much, especially with strangers. And you and I don't really know each other at all, so I'm doubly appreciative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is my 4th episode, sort of flying by the seat of the pants. Oh, fellow LaCroix drinker. Man, we have so much in common.
This is kismet right here. This is fate. This is a Greek.
That's myth. Not LaCroix?
No, it is. I'm saying what's happening is like a Greek myth. The fated chance that two strangers could share so much.
Yeah, man, I really wish I had known the reference because I was just like, oh, there's a knockoff brand of seltzer called Kismet.
I'm trying to use bigger words now.
Yeah,
that's my new thing.
I'm gonna shoehorn Kismet into the next episode, like it's something I've known about forever.
Hell yeah. Lose loved ones, gain a whole new vocabulary.
Yeah,
that's my motto.
Well, in addition to being fellow LaCroix lovers, I assume, from what I can glean is that you and I are both members of the Dead Dad Club.
Yes,
you're my 4th guest on this show and 4th consecutive member
of just Dead Dad.
Yeah, I want to explore dead mothers, dead siblings, and whatnot, but whatever.
All sorts of dead people,
There's all sorts of grief that I want to explore.
A lot of grief, a lot of different types of dead folks out there.
Yeah,
all worth talking about, for sure.
Yeah, of course. Do you mind sharing with me how your father died or the circumstances around that?
Don't mind at all. My dad died of lung cancer.
Okay.
Technically,
was it a long battle?
Yeah, it was like 5. So he had stage 4 for like 5 years.
Oh wow,
which is wild.
It was at stage 4 when they caught it.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, and that was after already like a history of other little cancers throughout his body that they would like scrape away and then move on, and then it would come back every now and then maybe, but like for the most part wasn't pressing. But then the lung cancer when he was like first diagnosed was like diagnosed at stage 4, if I remember correctly.
Devastating.
Yeah, and then but a lot of experimental drugs and whatever, and then there was a bit of a remission for like a year-ish, and then who knows exactly what was going on because cancer is so fucking weird and devastating. But he managed to stick around for like a good 5 years with that.
That's a real blessing, if you can call it that.
It's funny because like you could have a terminal diagnosis or whatever and like anticipate, right? Like that like throws the mortality right in your face. Right. Yes. Like this person is going to die for sure. And then still feel shocked when it happened.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Because you're like, okay, died of, it was pneumonia and not the cancer. And it's like, well, no, the cancer didn't help the pneumonia at all.
That was what ultimately his cause of death was.
Yeah. So it was like a whole series of events where he started unraveling, but basically he had broken an ankle while on vacation.
Okay.
And then it was hard for my mom to start to, and that like coincided with a stomach bug,
Okay.
which turned out to be like colitis. But like my mom couldn't care for him at home alone, and I was like able to be there like every other day, but I couldn't be there like around the clock. And even then couldn't help him like move around because my dad was like a biggish dude. So like helping him move or like back and forth with this broken ankle to the bathroom a whole bunch was like just like not fucking feasible. And like his stomach was like really hurting, so we brought him to the ER. He got admitted for like colitis or whatever. And then while dealing with that, then like the plan was once the colitis and stuff like clears up, because he would also get like a whole lot of fluid buildup in his lungs, and those kind of like coincided with that happened again and coincided with the colitis. So they were like treating both of those for a couple weeks, and then they were ready to admit him to like a physical rehab place where like his ankle could get better or whatever. But then both he and my mom caught pneumonia in the hospital before they admitted him to the rehab place. So he got pneumonia. They moved him out of the hospital to the rehab place and at that point I was already like there every day and like all that shit. But like
did they live in the same city as you?
Yeah, not in the same city, but they're in Long Island. So like they're like 45 minutes away. So I would like be at work very early in the morning and then go, or just take off completely. And then when my mom got sick too, it was like, okay, I guess I will be there only and taking care of both of you until you're both better.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, my brother and I have a brother and a sister, both of whom have like families, and both of whom like were around and came, but we're like my sister's in Philly, and my brother's also in Brooklyn, but like with a family. It's like
it's
just
scheduling your life.
Yeah, I was the youngest, most able, virile, available, whatever. And so
virile.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the pneumonia is what got him in the rehab place like a few days later.
Yeah. Well, my condolences.
How'd your dad die?
We have similar stories. My dad had cancer. His initial diagnosis, which he didn't reveal to us till much later, was that they told me he had like 11 months to live. And he lived for, I think, 7.5 years beyond that. So
okay. So that's
it was also a lot of various factors. He also broke his ankle sometime in the mix there.
Yeah, it's didn't get wild how it just like completely like just makes you crumble.
Yes. And in these conversations, I've weighed which is a worse hand to be dealt, sudden loss of someone completely unexpected, or here's the news, but you have a timeline that is fluid and it may happen soon, it may happen in 5 years. I think you and I have the better of those two. But
yeah, for me, I'm always like, I don't know, it's all shitty.
Yeah, and I know,
I think when you're like living it, it's easy. Look, it's all shitty, but it's also all real, and it is what is happening like all around us or whatever. Yes. And like death just happened, like people die, got to get better with that, whatever. I do think there is something though, it's like something interesting that we do. I find myself doing it a bunch, is where I'm like, well, it could have been much worse or something, right? Yes. Like I want to honor that, like there's something that my brain does. Maybe it's trying to just trick me that like this isn't the most devastating thing, because it feels like such a devastating thing. So it's just like a self-protection.
Well, yeah, I mean, humor is, I use that a lot as self-protection. Like as soon as my dad died, I was telling jokes about it. And I don't, I wasn't even close to scraping the surface of processing what had happened, but I was like, well, this is what I need to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And as far as silver linings, I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad my dad didn't, wasn't on a ventilator for 10 months.
Right.
I'm super grateful that he never experienced the pandemic. We didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Which would have made everything a lot more difficult.
Totally.
So you have a show about grief. I noticed you. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So after my dad died, so like within the 3 years after my dad died, my grandfather, who I started taking care of, also died. Almost a year in the
a
year
punch.
to the day of my dad dying, almost like the day before. It would have been the year anniversary of my dad's death. My grandfather died. In between that, a friend killed those two dying. A friend had killed himself.
Wow.
And
That's
then
fucking tough.
Yeah, a little
really
bit after,
tough.
but yeah, and then I lost another friend unexpectedly, and then my uncle died of cancer that he never told any of us about. And then
I don't know what it is about cancer, but I know a lot of people that get the diagnosis, they don't want to tell anyone. And
right.
I think that's a pretty human thing. I don't know if they just don't want to be perceived differently.
I think people don't want to be perceived differently, weaker. They don't want like special treatment, right? I mean,
yes,
some people want special treatment, but I think for the most part, there's a good chunk of people who are like, oh, I don't want to be treated differently just because this shitty thing is happening or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't want to be defined by it because
right,
you're not the cancer guy. You're the guy who you've always been.
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with behind closed doors stuff that I don't know.
Yeah. And
like how Norm Macdonald did it. He just didn't tell anyone. And then.
Right. And like, I guess the weird thing is that it like, you don't want to be seen as different or whatever, but like, it totally makes you different. It like changes your physical capacity. It changes your mentality about things. Right. And it just makes it harder to like not accepting it in a way, right? Like it feels like a inability to accept, which like then makes the whole process just like a little bit harder. Like after losing so many people, so like there were like 3 more deaths. But yeah, like having lost so many people, it like the one thing that I realized is like after the first one, talking about it and like doing shit where I was like venting or whatever I could do, like you can't bring them back. But you're stuck with all these feelings. So like what you can do is just like be real with that and like let it pour out how it might. And I think the like accepting of diagnoses or whatever, like that just allows people to start being real and honest about how they're feeling about all of it, like way ahead of the game, I think, and makes like that transition to death a little bit easier, more loving.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that it's easier if you have time to process that you are going to die, but I really don't think that is the case in the people that I've been close to who died. I think I think all of them thought they had longer.
Well, that's the thing is like, ultimately, you can die any day, any minute,
of course.
Like, right? Like I know enough people who have died suddenly.
Yeah.
No diagnoses, accidental, like
absolutely.
that type of shit.
Yeah, especially comedians.
Yeah. So like there is some component of like, yeah, I don't think it makes it easier because it still sucks, right? Yeah. But like it does make it more manageable as like a shared thing, because it's not just like you dying, it's also people losing you. Yeah. But I think that's where I'm coming from, and maybe it's selfish, but no,
like, I sometimes feel a bit self-indulgent. Like this isn't purely for me to help you through this. you know, I'm getting something out of it. Right. But I think I think I have a lot of feelings of guilt regarding death, and I'm not alone in that. And I think everyone would benefit from letting go of if they can, of the grip that guilt has on us. Totally. So
so the show.
Yes, to back to that.
The
So you
show.
lost 5 or 6
So I
people
lost.
in a short amount of time.
I lost about 7 people within 3 years
Yeah,
throughout that,
brutal.
from my dad first dying, after like I took like a month break off from like performing and stuff. And then I went back to hosting my then like the weekly show that I run. And I tried not to talk about it. And so for like the whole show, I was just hosting and I wasn't going to be doing a
You tried
set.
not to talk about it on stage or just in general
On
also?
stage. I was like, okay, if I'm hosting, then I have a responsibility to keep a fun vibe.
Yeah,
I can't
you
really talk about like make it
sure.
about me, like whatever. And then like it felt like there was nothing else I wanted to talk about. And it was like really
Yeah.
hard. And then I did it and I kept the vibe good, but I was wearing a shirt the whole time that said my dad died 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Wow.
Or whatever. So that there was some way that I could acknowledge it, but I didn't
Sure.
like actually acknowledge it. But then I felt like, okay, well, this sucks. I'm not honoring like
Wait, I'm
how
sorry.
I'm
You
actually
did
feeling.
your set
I didn't do a
without
set.
with you just wore the shirt, but you did not acknowledge what the shirt said. You did regular
No,
material?
yeah, I just did crowd work,
Okay, sure.
kind of hyping
But you
people
didn't
up.
address the message that was literally on your chest.
No,
Okay.
no,
I like
and I
that.
think I only revealed it at the end of the show. I think I was like, "Thanks so much for coming. I hope y'all had fun," and then I like revealed
Sure. That's
the
something you
shirt.
say for the end, especially in a
Yeah,
comedy show.
right. Until I got home and I was like, oh, that I want to like, I liked being back on stage and like fucking around and whatever.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, I want to go back to doing sets, but I also don't know what I would talk about other than what's going on. Like, what could I possibly write a bit about
Yeah.
other than
I would say just about every other issue that I was concerned with paled in comparison. Like you're like, what am I gonna write about?
my
The
dad died like
nuances of Facebook.
right.
Like,
Like my dad died the night before Trump was inaugurated. So like
oh
our last
wow,
moments together were him struggling for breath. I don't know if you remember, but there was that like pre-inauguration weird like party thing that they did, and there were like all these like shitty fucking like musical acts and like weird. It was so weird, but like that was stuck on the fucking TV in this rehab place, and my dad was just struggling for his last breaths. And then the next day Trump was inaugurated, and like that weekend there were a bunch of protests. Like there was like the fucking Pussy Hat March, right? And then
right.
there was also a bunch of protests going on at like the airports because of that executive order that Trump immediately put through about like banning
The Muslims,
travel from like
the
9
seven.
different
Yeah,
countries or
yeah,
whatever. Right. So like there were all these fucking global issues and like national things that
yeah,
like I also gave a shit about. Right. But so like there were things that I was like anxieties I was coming into it with already, like, oh no, my comedy career ain't going well, blah 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 blah. This is happening. This like this national
yeah,
news, this whatever. And then like for that whole weekend, it was like if I wanted to, it was just so funny. Like you're trying to all you want to do is scream about what's happening and like who you
yes,
lost or whatever, and you want people to acknowledge it in some way, even though that no matter what they say it doesn't help and doesn't feel good or whatever.
yeah,
But like for the most part, and it's just a matter of like letting it out. But it was like a time letting it out and being acknowledged that you're letting it out. But like that whole weekend it was like, oh,
the
we're
world's
all
on
on a different.
fire, so no one was like,
Yeah,
oh, you have
yeah,
problems.
exactly. And so like I remember I did flood Facebook for like that weekend and the next week, like making like little silly little posts where everything was like sort of topical, but the punchline was always like, bring my dad back. I miss my dad.
Sure.
Whatever. Like I wanted, it felt like losing my dad had to be a national crisis as well. Right. Because
Yeah,
it was like such a personal crisis. Um, but yeah, I like
right.
I was
I
like, fuck, I like doing bits. I need to keep doing bits. How do I do them and incorporate this thing that like I can't not talk about and call attention to because it's all I'm thinking about right now. And so
sure.
like I slowly started coming up with some fun ideas for shit. all of it was like interactive and kind of goofy, but the thrust of it was like I am losing people and taking care of dying family members left and right, and like
right,
I am please, I'm like I feel like I am drowning in deaths right now or whatever.
yeah. I mean, sometimes
Like
laughter is just very a step removed from crying, you know.
absolutely.
Especially
Yeah.
like even in pettier circumstances, like when I'm at work and
Mm-hmm.
shit's piling up.
Yeah.
And I just,
Yeah.
instead of freaking out, I just start laughing like a complete lunatic. And I go, oh,
Oh, yeah.
this is my body like shaking off I don't know. I don't want to say bad vibes because I'm not some sort of like chakra hippie type person, but it's
Nah,
like
but
my body
I
being
get
like
bad vibes.
literally
Yeah. No,
convulsing.
totally. Totally. Yeah. So it was like, I don't know. There was nothing else I could talk about.
So you made a whole
I
show
made
of
a
it.
bunch of bit. I like formed all of my shit before this was very like fantastical, not fantastical, but like not grounded in reality, right?
Yes.
Like just goofy characters who like I
Yeah.
wasn't. There was no true like me, my life biographical kind of stuff.
So did
And
it
this was
feel
like
like you were sort of taking off the mask when you started to write jokes about personal events?
it felt like not that I was taking off a mask, but that it changed my like relationship to how I was on like what I can be on stage and what I can do on stage. Cause like there were times where I would create characters that would like, okay, I'm gonna do a character who's a boxer because I really want an audience member to have to punch me,
Okay.
right? To
Yeah.
like right, like, and that's how I used to build and still kind of build bits is like, okay, what do I want to happen? I want an audience member to put a boxing glove on and like punch me and then I spit up or something, right?
Okay.
Like whatever. Okay. So how do I get there? Well, what if I'm a boxer guy or a guy who owns a boxing gym right down the block and I talk to everybody about that and like whatever. For some reason, I didn't think it would work. I don't know. I don't know why, but I didn't really think it would work if I was just Ben opening up a
Yeah.
boxing gym. So it was like, all
Okay.
right, let me put on a fucking accent and an outfit. But now but like then starting to just talk about real shit, right? Like I've written non-grief, death related stuff in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Um, but uh when I do it, like they're not really within the scope of a character. Like I'm still the character, like I'm a character-ish, but like I take on the character, but it's still very me.
Sure.
But yeah, there was something about that, like because all the bits about the losses and stuff were like, okay, I'm gonna hey, I miss talking. They're all reactive to whatever I was feeling at the time with it. So like um because I don't like do jokes, which I think makes it easier for people to process through their comedy, maybe because like you can have your thought. Like, okay, so for example, uh I really met there was like one day where I just really missed talking to my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Used to give great advice. Was an incredible conversationalist, good listener. And I really just miss talking to my dad. And I think for like most comedians, you could probably build a chunk out of that by being like, hey, I miss talking to my dad. We used to talk about funny thing, funny thing. He used to do this thing when we talked, and he always said his P's real spitty. And then you do a
Yeah.
funny impression, right? Like whatever it is. But like with stand up, I think there's a way that you can like mold it into like a memory and tribute and also funny. And for like my shit, which is always like high concept, interactive, crowd worky,
Fantastical.
fantastical, chaotic, or whatever, it's like, okay, I want the audience to know that I miss talking to my dad. What do I do? And so I
Yeah.
like
And you have to make it
did a
big,
seance.
I would imagine. Oh, you did a seance?
Yeah.
That's
So then
awesome.
I would just like do a seance with the crowd in an effort to talk to
That's
my dad. And
I
I'd
really
like,
like that. And how was the
and
response?
so it's great. You know, I bring 4 people up on stage and one of them's the medium and like a couple of them are holding candles and one of them's holding a bell, and I make people hold hands sometimes. I get into fights with the tech guy if they can't dim the lights. Like it's a whole fucking thing. But then it's like, do you know, and when like all of my stuff is sort of built to like fail, and that's where the comedy is. Like the comedy is never like, oh, my dad died, my friend killed himself, ha 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 ha, that's so funny. It's always like, hey, I miss talking to my dad, so I'm gonna get into witchcraft, I guess. So like the show is all those is built around a bunch of those bits that I had been performing as people were dying, mixed with these like more vulnerable, quieter, right? So like a lot of chaotic, high energy stuff revolved around grief, and then quieter like crowd worky conversation moments where me and the audience get to like kind of like what we're doing now, talk about their losses and who they've lost, and just get people to talk about their grief and their loved ones, and also you know, death in general. So it's like a mix of high octane shit.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I'd like to come to the next one. How many have you performed?
I've done it so far 3 times. Tomorrow I'm doing it in Philly at Johnny Brenda's, which will be fun. And then next Saturday, the 26th, I'm doing it at a funeral home in Greenpoint, which is going to be really good. And hopefully I can do those more.
Are you going to try to record it in some capacity?
I've taped a bunch of them so far just so I can keep working on it, because it keeps changing every time I do it. Little tweaks here and there. More, I'm like holding stuff now. I'm like building a set and like lights because the funeral home doesn't have stuff. Do it really.
Well, of course they don't.
Right. Why would they? But yeah, the plan is to compile all the footage from all the times that I have recorded it and make a little project out of that, and then have that come out next year, hopefully. I don't want to do this for more than a year because it's weird doing it after.
Does it feel like there's not like a timestamp, but maybe like a shelf life, or no?
Yeah. And I feel like it's already passed. I mean, like, I don't know. There's something in those first couple years, as like, you know, everyone was fallen.
Yeah.
My energy, like these bits were like incredibly cathartic. Like this material was super cathartic for me, really allowed me to like process and vent and still do comedy or whatever. I think because there were so many deaths and so many opportunities for grief in the last 4 years, not even including the pandemic, I think like my like emotional relationship to both death, these specific losses, grief, and like whatever has totally like has shifted in a way where like I have a much clearer understanding and I feel better about things or whatever. Not to say that they're not bad and make me sad or any of that.
It's a work in progress.
There is that shelf life where like there's a different emotional energy that I'm tapping into now when I'm doing this stuff. And then also like I've had this worry, and I think a lot of people have this worry after losing people, is like it still matters to you. But it's also like, all right, well, look, that was over 2 years ago, man, get over it, right? Like you have this worry that you're like,
sort of an expiration date on the relevance of your trauma.
Like right, and like empathy doesn't have an expiration date or whatever, but it does feel like, oh no, maybe people won't care anymore, or like I should be expected to be okay with it, which I am okay with it, but I'm still wanting to do the fucking show about it.
I think you should do it as long as it's fun.
Right.
I have a bit about my last summer. My mother and I went on a road trip to spread my dad's ashes, and I have a huge story about it. We spread it on like someone else's private property, and then my mom was like, hey, I used to live here, and like like went in the house, so I'm like literally getting ashes all over my shelf.
That's so funny.
And it's a really fun bit to do. I've only done it about 6, maybe even less, maybe 4 times. I want to get a video of it, but it does also feel like every time I'm like, I open with like, recently I was trying to spread my father's ashes on someone else's private property. But even as I say that, I go, recently, that was 7 months ago, like in my head, I'm like, I gotta get this out. I gotta publish this before people stop caring. And I'm like, anyone who has cared this far still cares, and anyone who doesn't care was never on their radar.
Right.
So
exactly,
that's just another part of the guilt where I have to go, come on.
Yeah.
You know how many people are like, have been doing the same comedy act for like 15 years. And they're like, the other day, 9/11 happened. I'm like, you could update the references.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of pushing through with grief, right? Like both in making it okay to still feel affected, right? Because like, I think and if you don't have a healthy relationship to it, which is fair, because like, why should you? Because everything about it kind of is scary, and the way it's mostly presented and the way that like the death industry operates is so like apathetic and impersonal that for the most part, that like it doesn't help us get a better relationship to any of it. But it's like, okay, people either are convinced that they have to bury it immediately, or the other way, and like just be defined by it. I think.
No, that does seem like the two courses that a lot of people take.
And I think like the medium of being able to keep that grief, because it will be alive, right? Like it's not going away, but it ebbs and flows, and being able to talk about it to people as like that kind of natural thing where like you don't have to make, like, that's why I'm still doing, like, I'm still trying to figure out the like timing of the show, right? Do I talk about it as if these losses are active, or do I talk about it as if this happened? Because if it happened, same thing. Why would people care if it's active? And
also, this is a timeless topic. You know what I mean? It's never not going to be relevant to almost everyone in the world, just maybe not on the same day. Because
and I don't know, comedy I don't think is an art, but people do, and art you get to have license to fudge with a little bit of stuff or whatever, right? So like if I wanted, I can make this show be, this is all happening in the present, or I can make it be like that it happened. It can be, I was recently spreading my father's ashes, or like after my dad died, like a year after my dad died, I my mom and I spread his ash, right? Like whatever it is. But like that second one, which is more honest and which just frames it as like a thing where and it still matters. But like
I have to wonder how much of it is just ourselves getting hung up on our own, not art, because if the audience is like, I don't know if the audience is like, did this really just happen, or are they even thinking that at all? They're just there for the ride.
I don't know if that's because I'm a comedian. I definitely, anytime I've heard a person say like, oh, the other day after a show, I was telling that joke, and like, first off, if anybody even came up to you and said the funny thing you're about to say, I'll pay you $1 million.
Right. But that's such a funny comedic device. About that, it's like
3 days ago or whatever. Right. Like
it's just the formula for, hey, how can I make this joke longer? Here was someone else's reaction to this joke that I also constructed.
Totally.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the timing thing is interesting.
I don't think it needs to be linear in how you dispense of your grief, or not dispense, disclose.
Right. Or just feel it, because it's not, right? It's
and also, I mean,
those fucking stages as if like they're sometimes like you feel like first you're angry, then you're in denial, like, or whatever the fuck, and it's like, hey,
I think
babe,
there's definitely some delayed after effects with grief,
Oh yeah.
Especially like week of, I was like, I'm fine, I'm doing good. And then like 6 months later, you hear that song when you're in the supermarket and you're like, oh shit.
Right.
I forgot that I didn't I forgot that I didn't deal with the worst thing that ever happened to me.
I'm very much not okay.
Right. Well, that's cool, man. I want to come see your show. I probably won't have this published in time to give it a big boost from my from my plug.
That's all good.
I tell me
I'm
about your dad's sense of humor.
Gonna keep doing it. He was funny.
Okay.
I don't know. I found him funny. He was like, I think his sense of humor, what he found funny was mostly when I was younger, stuff that like lived in the absurd, and also like highly expressive, emotionally charged things. So like he liked when like people were like aggressively frustrated or like overly sad or whatever, right? Like people who were just like real extremes. Little bit extra was like generally a good laugh for him.
Nice.
But yeah, he always reminded everyone that in middle school he was voted class wit.
Wow.
Which like
that's like the refined version of class clown.
Yeah, exactly.
Class wit.
Class clown, like
resident
class
jester
wit in the 50s.
Well, you know, that's cool.
What about your dad?
He had a good sense of humor. He was very funny. He had no shame in laughing the hardest at his own jokes. You know,
love that.
He would laugh until his face was red. Super funny guy, and also pretty dry sometimes. Mm-hmm. I remember one time we were it was him and I driving in the van. This piece of shit van that was always breaking down. We had like, you know, bungee cords and duct tape holding the bumper on, and it died and it came to like a stop at the side of the road. And he just looks at me. I'm like 8. He's like, someday all this will be yours. I was like, hell yeah. A normal dad would be like swearing and be like, God damn it, I'm stuck on the side of the freeway. He's like, I'm going to tell this joke just for me.
Just for me. Yeah. Yeah, my dad did a lot of also just for me jokes.
I like that.
He liked making himself laugh.
Well, that's if you can't laugh at yourself. Or
something. Yeah. Which is probably why I don't care so much about what the audience thinks most of the time. And I'm so willing to just do what I think is funny.
Sure. Did your father have opportunity to see your stand-up?
Yeah, he would come he came, I'm trying to think, did my parents come to all of them? Yeah, until he died, my parents came to had seen all my like solo shows. I don't think he ever saw me just like do a set. But he definitely he saw me do like 4 different hour-long goofy solo shows. Maybe
that's good.
3. Yeah. He was supportive, liked it, thought it was funny. Though I do remember there was like a time a bunch of years ago when I would just repeatedly post stuff about people eating my ass on Facebook.
And I seem to recall that.
Yeah, and I remember at one point in the hospital towards the end, he had like, we were like talking and like I was on my phone and he looked at me and he was like, what are you gonna say, one of those eat my ass things again? And I was like, yeah, maybe. And he was like, I'll be honest, I don't get it. And I was like, it's fine, it's not for you to get. And so he was also like really good, I think, generally about knowing when something wasn't for him. Like this was also just generally, but knowing when something wasn't for him, but also seeing the validity in it, which I always appreciated.
Yeah, that's a good characteristic to have a hold on.
Yeah.
They're like, this isn't for me, but I could see why it is for some.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Nice.
Yeah. Did your dad get to see you?
Yeah, he did actually. He saw me do a half hour a couple times, and
how did that go? How'd that feel?
My parents are very supportive of me. So
I love that.
Yeah. Even if they don't understand necessarily even some of the references or even some of what I'm saying because of how I talk, it's not the same as how they talk.
Yeah.
But no, they're nothing but supportive. That's good.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have parents that try to understand what you're doing. So many of our contemporaries are just like, I'm like this because my parents are fucked up. I'm like, what's my excuse? I have nothing but support.
I don't have that.
I go, what does that say about me and my mental health?
Yeah.
If that's what you credit as your
right. I mean, I'm definitely
growth.
like this because my parents are fucked up or whatever, but also I'm like, I'm whatever.
Yeah. I mean, fucked up is there's such a spectrum. There's such a spectrum of fucked up.
Oh, totally.
And you meet people that are like super normal, you're like, oh my God, you must have the biggest skeletons in your closet. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let me think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on.
Cool.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you sharing your time.
Of course.
So does he have a gravestone somewhere? Is there somewhere you visit him and pay tribute?
Yeah, he's got a gravestone that I designed.
Oh wow,
it was like,
why do you laugh at that?
Because it's like such a funny, wild. I don't know. It's like I never anticipated having to pick out the color, design, word, or any of that. Right. So it's like, what? Why am I doing that?
Did you guys ever have that discussion before he died?
No.
Okay,
and he was like generally not down to be having those discussions. Like he was working through it himself or whatever.
Yeah, no, of course.
And like I tried a couple times to say stuff, but
yeah, it's a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's buried out in Queens. I will generally visit his grave on his birthday, his death anniversary,
of course,
and then sometimes on Father's Day, just because everyone else is talking about their dad.
I forgot about how Father's Day is just a huge reminder for everyone who is fatherless.
Yeah,
you're like, I guess I'll stay off social media today.
Right. Well, because it's like, okay, I can either post a tribute and say, miss you, big guy, or I can, and then be flooded with people being like, look at my hot, sexy dad or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I can just avoid it.
Or you could combine and be like, hey, look how sexy my dad used to be. Rest in peace, big dog.
That's a good one. I like that. Like, in honor of everyone's hot dads, here's my hot dead dad.
My dad was too hot for life itself.
Oxygen couldn't handle.
Well, that's nice that you have somewhere to remember him. We never really had the conversation before he died, and since he's died, we haven't. There's no. He was cremated, and we don't have a gravestone, which I don't think is necessary. And I asked my mom about it, and she's like, I don't think he would want one. And I go, you're right. And this is not a thing I've ever actually considered before this moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the benefit of me having, a stone wherever. I don't even know where it would be. We'd probably bury him in Minnesota where we lived, or in Chicago where he was from. But I'm like,
where did you spread the ashes?
So we went to the house in Wisconsin where my mother and father lived when they first met. And that was super fun. That was super fun because the house was occupied at the time, and I still managed to do it. And then we went to the chapel in Illinois where they were married, and then some other sentimental building that had significance to them, but not to me. And that was cool. And I still have a ton of it. I've spoke on it on the show before, but there sure is a lot of human remains. They give you a lot. It's like a shoebox.
Yeah. I mean, it is conservation of mass or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's just another one of those things that you don't consider, and you go, I didn't think it would weigh this much. You go, well, process that one at a later date also,
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever. I mean, you and I both know that we carry our parents, or my dad, I carry your dad in my memory. I don't know what I'm trying to say, man.
Here. That really
in fact, where is that cemetery in Queens?
Yeah.
I actually I need an avatar for my grief.
Yeah, no, sometimes I forget about my dad. So it's really helpful if you're always keeping it in your thoughts. I'm always thinking about yours for sure.
Yeah, you jest, but I do occasionally. I'll go like weeks without thinking about my dad, and I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah, totally.
I totally forgot.
Totally.
And
happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's not a marathon, or I don't know, whatever expression I'm trying to say. It's not the point is we're all gonna process it at our own pace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I like that you're doing comedy about it. I think it's really important.
Thanks. Yeah. Me too. I mean, yeah.
When did you say March 26th, the Greenpoint one?
Greenpoint one is March 26th. Yeah.
I'm repeating it only for me since it won't be published, but I do want to kind of try to make it out there.
Sparrow Funeral Home.
Okay. So yeah, tell me how you got the venue.
My friend Lily is the funeral director there, and they're like a contemporary funeral home, doing really cool stuff. They're like offering grief groups, and they have a like gift shop / death related stuff shop, with like really beautiful urns and incense and seed packs that you can bury someone with, and
that's very sweet.
A lot of sustainable, beautiful kind of stuff. But yeah, they are a new funeral home that's like reframing how we approach death and the death industry. And that's good. Yeah, my friend's the funeral director there, and we were talking one night, and I was like, "Yep, I got this show." A bunch of months ago, we were talking about this, and it was like, "Yeah, I got this show that I'm going to start doing soon. It's about death." And she was like, "Oh, you should maybe do it at the funeral home."
It's perfect.
Yeah, so I think it'll be really good. All the shows so far have been fun, and they haven't been at a funeral home. So I can only imagine that the one at a funeral home will either be really good or really awful.
I think it's going to be great.
Or yeah, medium. Who knows?
No, you're like the only options are good, bad, or somewhere in the vast gray area in between.
Nah, it'll be
your fate is sealed.
Absolutely. I have no option anymore.
So do you do it solo? Do you have an opener? Is it weird to have other comedy?
No, I usually have an opener.
And they just do regular conventional stand-up.
Usually, yeah. It depends on like who I have or whatever. But yeah, so far they've just been doing I'm not like, hey, you got to talk about death.
No, of course.
And I'm also not like,
I just wonder, it would be kind of a hard cold open, no pun intended, but like to be like, here's the show. But I mean, people know what they're getting into. They see the flyer. It's not like,
yeah, people know what they're getting into. People know exactly what they're getting into. I think, I don't know. My whole thing is like, I want the people who are opening for me to be funny and have fun, and whatever that means.
Ridiculous right? Standards.
Like, I want the audience to know that this is going to be a fun show and a good show, etc. So yeah, I don't know. Whatever that winds up meaning, whatever they do, let them do.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still weighing whether or not I want an opener continuing. I'm like, what is this adding? Does it add something? Is it just like, I don't know. I'm funny enough that I can get people to laugh.
Well,
like
of course.
If I were to do this show in a theater or something, I think part of having openers is like, if I take it on the road, people might want to come out for like local acts.
Yeah. Also, it's nice to have like a little, not a palate cleanser, but like an appetizer.
A amuse bouche. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So I don't know. We'll see what goes on.
Yeah. Cool. Well, best of luck with that. I hope I can catch it.
Yeah, and if you can't catch this month, come to a future one. I'm hopefully doing it monthly at the funeral home, as long as this one goes well.
That's the plan. That's great. Do you have a date for the second one? Because maybe this will be released in time. for the plug?
I don't, but I will let you know.
Yeah, let me where can people follow you? Let's do the plugs.
Ooh, plugs, baby. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Wasser Tweet, Instagram at Ben Wassergram.
Nice.
Those are the only places I'm really on.
I neglected to ask for plugs for my previous 3 guests, and I was weighing
awesome.
like how
I can't
it
wait
feels.
to be the first plug.
Yeah, exactly. The honor is all yours.
We'll see what your bump does.
Yeah. Well, I think I've exhausted most of my questions, unless.
Okay. Cool.
It's really nice having this conversation, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, this was great.
You being down to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. And
yeah, of course.
With me and sharing.
What was your father's name?
Special. Oh, my dad's name was Howard.
Howard.
Yeah, I forgot to. I usually ask that. What was your dad's
Kevin.
name? Kevin. Yeah. A classic. Kevin.
Well, Howard, Kevin, rest in peace.
Yeah. Miss you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thanks so much, Ben Wasserman. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.
And I hope to see you at your show soon.
Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Take care, man.
Later.
So that was it. That was episode 4. Thanks for listening. And a big thank you to Ben Wasserman for sharing your story. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to tell your friends about it, like and subscribe, leave me positive comments. And that's about it. Tune in next week. I had a really, really riveting conversation with comedian Patrick Reinbauer. I'm excited to put that one out. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.